No weapon, no training, no government backing him. Just a regular man with a camera and information the Soviet Union would have killed to keep secret. The KGB was the most feared intelligence organization in human history. 90,000 full-time agents, millions of informants spread across every city, every apartment block, every workplace. A surveillance network so deep that Soviet citizens were afraid to speak inside their own homes. They watched everything. And one unarmed civilian, nobody special, nobody powerful, walked straight through the middle of it. He didn't hack their computers, he didn't steal their files, he didn't fire a single shot. He just looked and wrote down what he saw. And somehow, that was enough to blind them. Here's the part that will make your stomach drop. Level 1. The empire that watched everyone. To understand what this man did, you need to feel how suffocating Soviet intelligence really was. The KGB didn't just spy on enemies, it spied on everyone. Your neighbor could be reporting on you, your coworker, your own family member. People informed on each other just to stay safe, just to avoid being the one who got taken away at 3 a.m. And at the center of all this, a network of listening posts, surveillance stations, and signal intelligence facilities spread across the Soviet Union and its controlled territories. These weren't just buildings, they were ears, pointed at the West, collecting signals, intercepting communications, tracking military movements, feeding information up a chain that ended on the desks of men in Moscow, who used it to make decisions that affected hundreds of millions of lives. The system ran on secrecy. The locations of these facilities were classified at the highest level. Western intelligence agencies spent billions of dollars trying to map them. They couldn't get close. And then, a man with a camera and too much free time started taking walks. But who was he? And how did someone with no clearance, no training, and no resources find what billion-dollar intelligence agencies couldn't? Level 2. The man with nothing. His name isn't important right now. What matters is what he was. Ordinary. Completely, deliberately, almost aggressively ordinary. He worked a normal job, lived in a normal apartment, had no connection to any intelligence agency, Western or otherwise. He wasn't recruited. Nobody handed him a mission. He just started noticing things. Antennas that didn't belong. Buildings with no windows, but very obvious power lines running into them. Trucks with unusual equipment arriving at strange hours. Compounds surrounded by fences that seemed too serious for whatever they were supposed to be. He didn't know what any of it meant at first. So he did what curious people do. He started documenting. Photographs from public roads, handwritten notes about locations, times, the direction antennas were pointing. Simple observations that any person walking past could have made, but nobody ever bothered to make. He wasn't breaking any laws. He wasn't trespassing. He was just a man on a public road with a camera. But what he was building, piece by piece, photograph by photograph, was something that the KGB had spent decades making sure nobody could build. A map. And that map was about to cause a serious problem. Level 3. The map that shouldn't exist. Over months, then years, his documentation grew dozens. Cross-referenced locations, signal patterns he had identified just by watching which directions the antennas pointed and when they moved. He wasn't a signals expert. He wasn't a trained analyst. But he was consistent, patient, methodical in a way that professional intelligence agencies, buried in bureaucracy and politics, often failed to be. When he eventually made contact with people who could understand what he had collected, the reaction wasn't excitement. It was shock. Because what this unarmed civilian had assembled in his spare time, with a cheap camera and a notebook, was more accurate and complete than anything Western intelligence had produced through years of expensive satellite surveillance and covert operations. He had found facilities they didn't know existed. He had identified the function of buildings that had been listed as factories or research centers for decades. He had essentially drawn a map of the Soviet intelligence grid's nervous system. Now, here's where I want to stop and ask you something real. At this point, this man has information that governments would pay millions for. Information that could genuinely change the balance of power in the Cold War. He's still just a civilian. No protection, no resources. The KGB has informants everywhere. If you were him, what do you do next? Do you hand it over? Do you stay quiet and protect yourself? Or do you keep going? Because what he chose changed everything and put him in the most dangerous position of his life.
Level 4. When the KGB started looking back, the Soviet intelligence machine wasn't stupid. Somewhere in their system, a pattern was noticed. Reports from local informants, a man seen repeatedly near restricted areas, photographs being taken from public roads. Nothing illegal, nothing they could arrest him for immediately, but enough to flag him. The KGB opened a file, and now the man who had spent years watching them suddenly had them watching him. The pressure of that is almost impossible to describe. These were people who made individuals disappear, who could have him followed, his home searched, his contacts arrested, who could manufacture crimes if they needed to. He knew what they were capable of. He had been documenting their capabilities for years. The fear must have been overwhelming. Every person he passed on the street, was that someone watching him? Every car parked outside his building, was it the same one from yesterday? But here's what the KGB didn't realize. By the time they opened that file, it was already too late. The information was already out. The killer ending. What he had collected had already been shared, copied, passed through channels the KGB couldn't trace or stop. The map existed now, in multiple places, in multiple hands. And the moment Western analysts began working through it, the damage to Soviet intelligence became clear. Facilities that had operated in complete secrecy for decades were now identified, their locations known, their functions understood, their antenna directions logged, which meant the signals they were collecting could now be anticipated. The Soviet intelligence grid had been built on one single assumption: that nobody on the outside could see it. That assumption was now broken. Intelligence operations that depended on those facilities had to be reconsidered. Assets who communicated through certain channels were potentially exposed. Decades of careful construction suddenly compromised by a man who just kept taking notes on his lunch break. The KGB response was exactly what you would expect from an organization built on control and fear. They panicked, quietly, moved assets, changed frequencies, relocated some operations entirely. All of that costs money, time, and most importantly, trust. Because when you have to move everything, your own people start asking why. And when your own people start asking why, the cracks inside the system get wider.
Here's the final question, and I want your honest answer in the comments. Was this civilian a hero who used nothing but curiosity and courage to damage one of the most powerful surveillance states in history? Or was he reckless, a man who had no idea of the real consequences his actions could trigger for people far beyond himself? Because both of those things can be true at the same time. And that's what makes this story so uncomfortable. The KGB had 90,000 agents, millions of informants, billion-dollar facilities, decades of secrets buried so deep that entire governments couldn't find them. And one unarmed man, no weapon, no rank, no protection, found them with a camera and a notebook and the patience to just keep looking. The most powerful intelligence grid in Soviet history, blinded by someone they never took seriously, until it was too late.